Councilmember Bergan and I kind of started out this conversation because we're moving over to Teams starting next month. So it's a platform we're all familiar with. So
easier. Okay.
Yeah, I was telling him we should have a huge celebration when we, after today's meeting, to end WebEx.
oh, there she is.
Oh, there she is. Good morning, Councilwoman Hancock.
Technical difficulties, but I'm here.
Welcome. Well, let's begin the meeting, shall we? And right off the bat, I guess, welcome Councilwoman Hancock, your first time joining us for a Water Policy Committee meeting. Welcome. I know she's fascinated with the water subjects. Any approval or changes to the minutes?
I was good with the minutes.
Okay, minutes are approved. Moving on to consent items 2A, Swervine with construction change order report.
And actually, Swerve had a family emergency, so he's out today. But there aren't any change orders this month. There are a couple of new projects that are on that list that we just got kicked off, but we have no change orders for this past month.
Thank you, Sarah. Now moving on to the John Murphy water supply update.
Good morning, everyone. So we are kind of where we would expect to be this time of year. I think things are chugging along. Demand is pretty steady for this time of year. In the report that I had through the end of January for this meeting, I think we were at 77% of storage. That's down to about 75 now, which we would expect another 20 days have gone by. Greg mentioned earlier the snowpack. We're right around 100% in all three basins, even in the areas that are particular to our collection systems. So that's good for this time of year. Obviously, it's still early February. Our snowiest months are yet to come. So, but it's good to be kind of at that normal range for this time of year and not have a whole bunch to make up with the hopes of a big storm or something like that. Other than that, I think if there are any questions, I think there's nothing really new to report.
Hey, John, if I might, Councilmember Sundberg, the average has changed. Is that not correct? So I think it's important for the council members to understand how the average has changed. So the average is based on a 30-year period, and that 30-year period went from 1990 to 2010 to 1980 to 2010 to 1990 to 2020. And when we're talking about the average, the most recent 30 years have been drier than the 30-year period before that. So average is a lower number than it was in the past. And I think many people don't recognize that because the 80s were a very wet period. And so you all understand averages. Just when you're thinking about 100% average, that is a lower number than it would have been 5 years ago under the old average. John,
can we get like 100-year or 90-year maybe? Just to look at how cyclical it is.
Might be interesting.
Yeah, that would be very interesting to look over 100 years. The Bureau of Reclamation puts out, has data going back 100 years for the Colorado River. I'm not sure if we have that much data for all three of the basins. John and I can certainly look into it and see what sort of data we have. But I don't know if we have 100 years worth of data.
Because it's on our basins, right? Okay.
I don't, but maybe
you weren't measuring it back then.
Natural Resources may have. Well, they'll have whatever they do have. I don't know how some of these stations when was the station installed, right? These are particular snowtail sites. But that's a good point, Alex. Thank you for mentioning that. If you do happen to be looking at one of the SNOTEL graphs, the graphs that show where we are. If you pay attention to the axes, it will show you from 0 to a number. That's the snow water equivalent in inches. So even though, as you look back, hey, we're at 100% of normal on the curve, right? But if you look at what that means in terms of snow water equivalent, that may give you a better idea of how much or how we're doing up in the mountains.
Makes sense.
Mayor Sundberg, I have a question. So based on the snowpack in the water that we have right now, do you project that we will be in a drought going forward, or are we pretty secure where we are right now as far as our water stores?
Good question.
Very good question. So I would say that we're in a pretty good position right now, a much better position than we have been in the past couple of years in terms of where we're at in our overall storage levels now. And if you refer to the graph that's on page 7 of 277 in the packet, that graph will kind of show you compared to the last several years where we're starting off the year. We're at like 120,000 acre feet of storage compared to some previous years we were down around the 100,000 mark to start the year off in January. So overall storage wise, I think we're in better shape than we have been in the past few years. And the snow situation is looking, nobody wants to say good or whatever, because it's really still very early in the season, but it's not bad, right? We're not below normal. So I would say, and then if you look at the graphs are a couple weeks old that are in the report, but there's a couple in there that talk about drought development likely or whatever. Those have improved in the last 20 days somewhat. So we're trending towards no drought, at least at this point, for what I can see.
And Councilmember Hancock, you'll hear that we're hedging our discussion here because it is early. Our biggest snows that impact us most are in March and April. Those are big, wet, heavy snows in the mountains that bring most of the moisture. We've had some really good snows right now, but to John's point, our reservoir levels came into this year stronger than they were last year. And mostly because of what happened later last year, we were able to recover them better. So we are in a better place, but we do have a water supply monitoring group that is meeting, matter of fact, next week. We will be looking at this, and we'll be looking at this on a regular basis. So hopefully by April, we'll be in a better place to give you a clearer report on where we'll be for this year, and as much for this year, but also for next year as well.
Any further questions for John or clarifications, John?
No, the only thing I was going to add was just anecdotally from my backyard. I'm happy that we've had some regular snow. I would think that my grass should be happy if this trend keeps up come spring, and which will help with demand. If we have had a long dry winter, then when people turn their sprinklers on, they're going to need a lot of water. But if we've had some regular precipitation, that should be helpful.
Certainly. Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Well, after our recent expensive water rights acquisitions, Kat's going to tell us if we have any money.
Yes. Well, so good morning. Yes, everyone. Kat Olugatun, Deputy Director of Business Services here at Aurora Water. So I am going to go over the 2023 fourth quarter update. And that's just all to talk about how we ended the year in terms of our revenues and expenditures and our reserves. So if you follow along with your packet, I think that it is on page 16, it starts. Our combined operating revenues, that's water, sewer, and storm water in the fourth quarter, were about 7% lower than planned, and about 5% lower than 2022. I'll talk a little bit about why that is, but I think you'll have a good idea. As a reminder, in 2023, Aurora Water implemented increases of 4% for water, 5% for sewer, and 3.5% for stormwater service, respectively. Our development revenues for water, sewer, and storm were higher. So they were about 40.7% higher than planned. We thought that 2023 was going to be a slower year. I think there is there was a lot of activity at the end of the year. If you recall, in 2023, we implemented increases of 6% average increase for water connection fees, and then 6.3 for sewer connection. And for 2024, we proposed a significant increase of 20% for development fees. And what that did was create a rush of activity at the end of the year from developers wanting to pay the 2023 fees and not the 2024 fees. And so I'll go over one of the tables later on, but you'll see a sharp increase. And so that was unusual, but ultimately not super surprising, just given the proposed fees for 2024. Any questions on that so far?
Okay, please. Oh, Councilmember Bergan. Please.
Maybe I'm ahead. In the report, it had that our supply and services was lower considerably, but it was because the lead project moved to capital. But
yes, and you are jumping a little ahead because I just got over the summary, so I'll go over the sheet. So yes, I'll get to that in a minute.
Thank you, sorry.
No worries. So we'll go over down to the next sort of section in the document, talking about expenditures, total operating expenditures, about 16.7 or 10% lower than planned. And this accounts for the 7.5 million Pueblo water lease for 2023 that was signed in December after the budget was approved. Personal services continue to be slightly lower. Expenditures just to vacancy savings and also a competitive labor market. Supplies and services were lower too than planned. And this was driven primarily by professional services, purchase water storage, and utilities. On the professional services, the spending was 6.8 million lower than planned. And so initially when we had sort of, I guess I would say booked the project, we had put the budget and the operating, and so we moved that budget to capital. And so that was, that's why it shows that it was lower than planned. We just moved it to a different place. And then the 3 million that City Council approved is going to be a technical move that will take place in a couple weeks during the 2024 spring supplemental process. So I think Councilwoman Bergan, you had a question on this one?
Yeah, just how does that work that we move the lead project to capital when isn't it operating costs?
Well, so there is a so I can't answer the question as to why you got moved over to capital. I can certainly get you an answer in writing for that. I think that was, I'll have to get with the team to figure out why, unless.
Yeah, and I can clarify a little bit. So we have a number of operating needs that are addressed through capital projects. So asset management type projects that will often show up in capital. So it doesn't really affect where the revenue comes from. So the revenue will come out of rate money or fee money, depending on if it's a growth related or an operational or asset management related need. But capital projects have a kind of a specific definition for what a capital project would be, and the lead service line replacement meets the definition of capital project. So there are some projects that are like that, or that are kind of, I guess I would say, gray area type projects. So they could be categorized as operating, or they could be categorized as capital. But when we go pursue things like loans, for example, or grants for our different needs, it sometimes can simplify them to have them categorized as capital when they meet the needs or the definition of a capital project. So this one was kind of in that gray area, but we are pursuing some grant and loan money. It's really a forgivable loan that we talk about in the form of a grant. So I think it works better to have it categorized as a capital project in order to pursue the funding. Does that help at all?
Yeah, if I might. Sure.
Yes.
So but in the lead program, as you're replacing pipes for residents,
Mm-hmm.
there's expenses from labor and so forth. So then at that point, then do you put it under operating? No.
No, the budget, and again, we could have it in operating. Operating, the most simple definition of operating needs would be ongoing recurring expenses to operate our system. And so the lead or a lot of asset management type needs could be categorized as ongoing because they are recurring. Lead, in some ways, after we go in and replace the lead service lines, it's a little more of a one-time, so it better fits
Oh.
the definition of a capital because it's a one-time effort to go do the conversion, and then it won't hit us over and over and over again. So
Yeah.
now again, it is asset management. From some perspective, again, a line could need replaced again in 50 years or 30 years. So you could look at it as operating. That's where it's kind of in a gray area. But because it's so infrequent and it's kind of a one-time need, it better fits the definition of capital project. And then it allows us to pursue the forgivable loan funding from the state as well.
Okay, thank you. That makes more sense.
Yep.
Thanks, Marshall. And then my team members also reminded me, thank you, that our portion of the 3 million is actually also part of a $15 million project. So it goes from 2023 until 2027. And so that is the larger capital. And so it just fits within this. And so this is just a small portion of an overall huge project that is under capital. All right. So moving on, talked about professional services. Purchase water storage came in 1.8 million lower than planned due to the timing of payments from the Frying Pan Arkansas project agreement. That was just, a sort of a timing issue. And then utilities were lower than planned, primarily just for the usage for homestake and pumping. The other part where we were lower than planned was on purchase vehicle and equipment replacement. This is still continuing with our supply chain shortages, and so we just have not been able to catch up there either. So any questions on that?
So far?
Okay.
Please go ahead, Kat.
Thank you. So we're going to talk about revenues and expenditures now. So if you look at, let me see what page this is. If you look at page 17, you will see where we ended up the year. And so there's a nice chart there. I want to bring your attention to the first row that says operating revenue. if you see where it says Q4 2023 versus year-to-date plan, and there is that 15 million negative number, that is what the variance that really happened because we had a late wet year. And so as you all recall, there was a lot of rain, and so that definitely affected our revenues, or the planned revenues that we had for last year. And so the other part that I want to show is the second row where it says development revenue. You can see our year-to-date, our plan was about 65 million. And in 2022, we actually were at 73. And then in 2023, at the end, we ended up with about 92 million. And a lot of it was really at the last quarter, just as developers wanted to pay those fees in 2023 prior to the increase. We had a bond proceeds for sewer. And so that's where you see that 45 million amount, and then the rest is interest income. And then at the bottom 3 or 4 rows, we're just looking at our expenditures. And so any questions on that chart?
Questions? Nope. Please continue, Kat.
Thank you. So as we move forward, our cash balances, there's another nice chart here, which are reserve and our cash balances. We are looking on the water fund at about 33.4 million, and the wastewater about 61.2 million, with about 113.9 million encumbrances and 35 million in the wastewater encumbrances. So any questions on our cash and reserves?
Doesn't look like it.
Okay. And then moving on, the last thing that I wanted to bring up here, unless there's other questions, is the water connections. There's a nice chart on page 18 of the total number of water connections. That's for single family, commercial, irrigation, and multifamily. And it's just showing you the purple line that's going through is the TAPI revenue. And so you can see there at the end of 2023 sort of goes upward in December. And so that is with the number of water connections slightly higher than 2022, but certainly not to the levels that we saw in 2020 and 2021. And then there's another chart, and there's 2 charts on page 19 that show the water monthly revenue and expenditures. And so if you can see, there is a dark bluish line that's going through that shows cash available, and then the revenue. And so the revenue is on gray. You can see that in November it's kind of a little standard, and then it shoots up in December. That's just to reflect the development fees that were paid. It was higher than normal. There's a little box there that shows that. And then the last chart I want to get into is just showing sort of the spikes on the wastewater revenue expenditures, just showing the debt issuance and then the higher connection fees collected for wastewater as well.
Great. Thanks, Kat. Question, Councilwoman Bergan.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. On the water connection fees, are you able to work with planning on projecting that out? So like, you know, if interest rates are high and so possibly housing is a little bit lower coming on board than maybe anticipated, do you see the projections, or do you just have to wait to see what comes in?
So we do look at projections, and that's how we develop our plan. And those are So I don't know if the plan department has their own. We certainly have our own, depending, we look at sort of what the city as a whole projects, and then we take that information and then input it in sort of what we know as well. And so planning does that too, but there is a sort of base that we use, which is what the city projects in development and growth and things like that. And so that's part of what comes into our own calculations.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilwoman Hancock, any questions? Great. Thank you, Kat.
Thank you.
Item number 3, Councilwoman Bergan should find interesting. It involves E470 and water, 2 committees she serves on. Sarah Young, please let us know about it.
Well, this one is pretty straightforward. So there, I'm not sure if you're aware, but about 13 miles of the Prairie Waters pipeline actually is in the E470 multiple use easement. And so it kind of hugs the east side of E470 all the way up north and comes down into the city. When that agreement was put in place, there are a couple of locations where if the water line needs to get moved, then it is the responsibility of Aurora Water to pay for that relocation and adjust those. However, in other locations where it needs to shift because of a new interchange, that's actually the responsibility of East 470 to fund that. So with the new interchange that's at 38th Avenue off of E470 for access to Aurora Highlands, that required a relocation of the Prairie Waters pipeline, which required an adjustment to that multiple use easement so that we're still kind of covered under that agreement. And that's basically all this is it just shifts the kind of documentation that show the legal descriptions of the location to a different location. So, and that's all funded by ARDA and E470, as well as the cost of the MUE adjustment.
Questions for Sarah? Pretty straightforward. Thank you, Sarah.
You bet. Thanks.
Is it me, or is Unnamed Creek at Jericho Way sound like a U2 song? Just me, I guess. Streets Have No Name, Joshua Tree. Okay, thank you. Moving on. James De Herrera, if you could touch on this one.
Absolutely. Good morning, council members. Good to see you again, and nice to meet you, council member Hancock. For today's agenda item here in front of you all, I want to introduce one of my team members, Sam Scorza. She takes the lead on much of our coordination with Mile High Flood District and has prepared a very short presentation to go over the IGA that's in front of you all today. So Sam, if you don't mind pulling up the PowerPoint.
Yep, WebEx just loves to take its time when I want to share. I am looking forward to Teams. It'll be great. Yes, hello, Water Policy Committee. Thank you so much for having me today. Like James said, I am the liaison that does a lot of the interfacing with Mile High Flood District, our regional waterways liaison. And every year, if we want to participate in a capital project with their help, their expertise, their money, we sign an intergovernmental agreement. Today, I have for you just one, and it is an amendment to a previous IGA that some of this water policy has seen before, which is the Unnamed Creek upstream of South Jericho Way. We could have come up with a better title for that, but pretty descriptive. There's an area right here just to the east of Jericho Way that is acting as a pond and needs to be cleaned up a little bit. So we've got overtopping along Jericho Way. The watershed doesn't have water quality significantly, and our maintenance team doesn't have a safe and easy access to get down into this feature to be able to clean it and maintain. So last year we signed the IGA to complete the design, and now we've got that design. We are mobilizing, and we just need to finish out the construction budget. And here's what the breakdown looks like. So in 2023, Aurora Water and the Mile High Flood District shared the cost of the design. And in 2024, we are sharing, putting more funds towards construction, bringing us to an ask of this year of $900,000, which is in our budget, and about 53% of the project is on us and 43% is on Mile High Flood District, where we'll have a total of $3 million. This is anticipated to be the final budget cost, but if more is required, then Mile High Flood District would cover that difference. I'm happy to stay on this slide, and my last slide is just questioning the committee if you support moving this towards regular council because it is an amendment.
Questions? Councilwoman Bergan.
Clarification, I can't remember because I served on Mile High a few years back. When these come up on the watershed and needing to do the design and make the improvements, does Mile High make the recommendation to us?
It can happen a few different ways. Typically, these projects will come out of a Mile High Flood District master plan where we pay in, but they manage a consultant to do a lot of the watershed modeling and come up with possible projects. It's on us to prioritize and say which ones we would like to pursue. This specific one actually was a request from us to the Mile High Flood District to help us maintain it. And when they saw the condition, we bumped it up to a capital project because it needed a little bit more work. So this one is our choice, our ask.
And so if they make a recommendation, like you said, we prioritize. So there are times where would we possibly disagree?
Yes. And at the end of the day, it is our responsibility and our place to finalize that report and note any disagreements or make sure that we don't publish the version of it that we don't want to pursue. And if we think that a project is not worth or wouldn't provide enough benefit or doesn't make sense right now, we don't push it forward. There's been almost no, if not no, decisions from Mile High to mandate which projects move forward.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Question, Sam, is the problem with this area is that the water is not flowing through it correctly and it's stagnant, or what is it?
Yes. So we cannot get in. Our operations team cannot safely enter this area to be able to clean debris and make sure that it is flowing correctly underneath the culvert under South Jericho Way. And this whole area is undersized and pinching things towards a specific point. And so some regrading to make sure that this actually holds water and releases it at a reasonable rate, and some access points so that our maintenance team can stay on top of that. That one tiny pinch point are what we're really pursuing here.
Thank you, Sam.
Mhm.
Any further questions?
How long is this area?
Ooh, that is a good question. I would like to say definitely less than a mile, likely less than a half a mile. I can check and get back to you, but it's relatively small.
Okay.
Thank you. Number 5, Alex, please tell us about a cost-sharing agreement for the Central Colorado River Basin Weather Modification Program.
Yes, good morning. I do not have a presentation because this is relatively straightforward, and at least Councilmember Bergan and Councilmember Sundberg, you have seen this before. Councilmember Hancock, this will be a little new to you, but it is an agreement that we have entered into annually for several years now. And we hope at some point to get a 5-year agreement in place so we don't have to do this every year. The program is the Central Colorado Mountains River Basin Weather Modification Program, or CCMRB program. And this is basically a cloud seeding program where the city of Aurora shares with a number of other cities that I had up earlier, the Colorado River Water Conservation District, the Northern Colorado Water Conservancy District, Southeastern Colorado Water Conservancy District, Denver Water, Board of Water Works at Pueblo, City of Colorado Springs, and Twin Lakes Reservoir Company, we share in the costs of annually participating in a cloud seeding program designed to increase precipitation in basins that are important to us. In this particular instance, those are the Eagle River basins above our Trans Mountain Colorado River Basin diversions. The cost to Aurora is $25,000 a year. We see that as a remarkably good value because we are participating with all these other entities in making this program happen. And I'll stop there and see if there's any questions.
Thanks for Alex. All right. Thanks.
Actually,
Councilwoman Bergan.
how much rain does it produce? Or
The science says that it can increase precipitation 10 to 15%. As always, when you're dealing with percentages, percent of what? Percent of normal? I'm not sure. But the science does support that it works to increase precipitation. There is a lot of determining when the conditions are most appropriate to shoot the silver dioxide into the air. And I think that makes a big difference in terms of the success over the year, is how often those conditions are appropriate to operate the cloud seeding.
Yeah, I remember, I think maybe it was last year we talked about when you do that. But yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Councilwoman Hancock.
Are there specific times of the year that this is done? And when have you determined its efficacy?
Good question. It's generally done during the winter. So the precipitation is in the form of snow as opposed to rain. And I understand that there has been work to determine the efficacy, but I could not talk to that right off the top of my head. So I'd be happy to look back into that and provide more details on the science if you're interested.
Just interested as it relates to how much water we're actually able to produce for the amount of monies that are being contributed. And, when we're doing cloud seeding, we are impacting the environment. And so if we're artificially producing precipitation, how does it impact the rest of, like, the land, for example? How does it impact air quality and those kind of things?
Yeah, great questions. I had some similar ones too when we first started getting involved. And I've been assured that the chemical used is safe. The silver dioxide is not an environmental contaminant. The impact on precipitation. So I think there's a little bit of question about, does that prevent precipitation from falling somewhere else or not? I don't think the science really knows that and can measure that very well. But all good questions. So, and because it's in the winter, it's looking at increasing the snowpack, which, currently our snowpack has been, we've been concerned because it's been, on average declining. So I think the impact is more positive. But those are all good questions, and I would be happy to look into them in more detail if that would be helpful for you.
I just would like, for my own edification and understanding, because we are so environmentally focused, and how does one thing impact another thing? Is it positive or is it negative? I would like to see that, because naturally things should occur, but if we're engaging in artificially making things happen, what are the consequences of that work? I'd be interested in knowing a little bit more about that.
I think that's a good point. You could also bring in the argument of damming rivers and creating reservoirs too, to artificially change water and so forth, right? Yeah.
So
sounds like sorcery to me. What thing?
What are we giving? What are we taking? And we're doing this. What are we losing? Are we losing? Is it all just a win-win, or is there some, unintended consequence that we don't know? It's just a question that I have. I know I don't expect that you know all those answers, but it gives me pause as to how we're, like, it's sorcery. How are we impacting what we're doing? And is it really good. Want it to be good downstream because we are playing the long game. So how does it happen and how does it impact us, for the future, 30 years in the future, if we can make that kind of prognostication. So
How about, so we have a couple of things we can forward to. We have a presentation that was a lot more detailed that we gave, I think a couple of years ago to the Water Policy Committee. We'll dig out that presentation and forward it over to you, Councilmember Hancock. Would the other committee members like that presentation also? Again, it was a couple of years ago that's got some of these answers in it. So we'll forward that to the entire committee. And then Alex, I know there's also an article or two that we had. I think we may have even provided those in the past. If not, we pulled those out and used them as reference when we gave the presentation. So we can forward an article or two along with that presentation as well.
Yes, I was actually looking for that presentation because I thought it would be helpful to have, and I couldn't find it. So, but we will find it and forward it to you. So thank you.
I have a copy of it, Alex.
Oh, great. Thank you, Casey.
These are good questions. Thank you. Moving on to miscellaneous matters for consideration. Council members, do you have any to bring up? I know, let's see, a month ago, there was a big deep freeze. Anybody remember that? Is that a month ago?
Yes, it was.
Approximately. And I know that the water department working in the field really worked hard because of frozen meters and pipes and things of that sort. So hats off to those guys and gals. I know Marshall is working on collecting information about turf conversions between Parks, Recreation, Open Space, and the water department, getting rid of thirsty grass in the city that's ornamental and doing something different, xeriscape wise or different turf. Councilmember Bergan.
Yeah, and obviously both you, Councilmember Sundberg, and Marshall were on my last email, I think yesterday. Just can we get an update on how we're working with HOAs and metro districts to educate them? And there's always the rift between homeowners and those special districts in terms of what they can do with our ordinance.
Yeah, I've asked this morning, I found the emails this morning and have asked staff to put together both a summary of what we allow, kind of summarizing the criteria, and then a summary of our communication efforts and the like with HOAs, metro districts specifically.
Because
so we will get out shortly.
They still have some discretion, obviously, in how the landscaping plan in the front yards look like, even though we're saying no turf, you can use artificial grass, you can do xeriscaping, but they still have some authority.
They do. They have some approval authority on the types of plants and landscaping. They can't deny low water use landscaping generally, but they can provide guidelines to their community members as far as what can be planted and installed. I'm going to have to verify, and I don't know, Greg, you may know this right off the top, but can an HOA prohibit artificial turf in the front yard even though we allow it?
I need to look at the legislation because there was legislation run last year that addressed that. I guess I need to look at that again. I know they can in the backyard, but I'm not certain about the front yard anymore.
Yeah, so we'll have to verify that because I'm not real clear on whether an HOA can prohibit artificial turf, even though we allow it and the state allows it. There's also state legislation pending right now that would ban artificial turf for water-wise applications, but the new legislation I know does not get into the residential space, so it will not ban it in residential spaces. It's focused on industrial, commercial, and common spaces. with an exception for sports fields. So it would ban artificial turf in medians or curbside landscapes or industrial parks. So that's kind of interesting, but it leaves the residential space alone. So we do need to do a little bit of research on the Canon HOA ban artificial turf in a front yard of a property within their HOA. I'm not 100% sure on that, so we'll have to verify.
I believe the state was wanting to ban it because it gives off so much heat. Is that correct? In those state buildings? And
they focused on two things, heat and chemicals. So they are arguing that some of the artificial turf will introduce PFAS, for example, into the environment. There are definitely different qualities of artificial turf. And so there have been some articles out there on the fact that some of the artificial turf is not PFAS free, for example. So they've latched onto that as well.
If I might.
Please.
Oh, I just want to bring back my point. Do we have a plan, a communication plan? And when will that be introduced to the metro districts in the HOA? Like, I don't know, did a letter go out to them to say, hey, this is our new ordinance last year? I don't know if they even are aware. I can't remember.
Yeah, so we have been communicating with the HOAs. My understanding, and Greg could correct me, my understanding is it's been primarily with individual HOAs. I don't think we sent a blanket letter out. What we've done is been communicating more verbally, encouraging them to call in with questions. I know we've been working with some of them on approved plant lists, trying to get them to have robust lists of plants that are water wise that they approve. Greg, anything to add?
Well, one thing to remember is the ordinance is forward looking, so this is a new development, John. So we are communicating with the developers on that one. We've had a long-standing relationship with most of our major HOAs and metro districts that we can engage with on how they work their covenants, how they to permit water-wise or xeriscape landscape, and that we've been doing over the past 15, 20 years. So that relationship has already been built. We did not do a mass communications to everyone again on the ordinance because it was forward-looking. It didn't impact anything that was already in the ground. That falls into that previous discussion on the covenants.
Yeah, but
Interesting.
But I think part of the issue, like on some of the master plan communities, at least in my ward, they are maybe half built out. So half of them have turf.
Half is, yeah.
The requirement by the developer and the, the metro district. And then half of their development is not yet done. And they were trying to okay, well, we have to follow the new ordinance, but it doesn't match. It looks bizarre to have this next door to this.
Right, and that was part of that discretion that was given to Marshall in this case to work with those developments to do a blend if they needed to, basically to mitigate that line that you're calling here. Yeah, so that you don't have house across the street with grass, house across the street with water wise, but they did have a discretion to bring in a plan that Marshall can approve that would accommodate that. And I don't know if, again, the communications I want to talk with Sarah's staff on that because they work with the development community going forward. Conservation is engaged with that in those discussions, but the day-to-day discussions happen with our planning folks. So I just want to make sure that we're communicating that. And it's a good point. Do we have a communications plan there? We probably don't, and we should develop one. So an excellent point on that.
And I like the idea of a letter that we send out to all the existing HOAs, whether they're half built out or all built out, that says, hey, just as a reminder, here are the rules that you need to play by. Here are the criteria. You cannot ban this, that, or the other. So
and if you have questions, please call. Blah.
Yes, exactly. A point of reference, yes. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And I believe Alex and John might be working on a longer term average snowfall analysis for us for next meeting, which might be fascinating to see.
Yes, and Councilmember Sundberg, I've got to confirm that with regards to the cloud seeding contract, that can be forwarded to study for full council approval?
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I missed that. Apologize.
No, that was my fault.
I rolled right through that one. Thank you. So yes, anybody opposed to seeing that move through to study session? Okay, so it goes through. Thank you. And I believe we've bought so many farms now that Marshall Brown will be
Good
seen in
business.
overalls and rubber boots around the building.
Yeah. I need to go buy some new boots. Yes.
Our next meeting will be March 20th. And thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.